Now, the word sozo, most often in the New Testament, it's translated as saved. But it's more than just the forgiveness of sins. That word actually encompasses everything that Jesus came to do. In fact, I say it like this a lot of times. I say, he was far more successful than you might have been taught. Okay, point number 10 is this. A series of miracles in Luke chapter 7 and 8, they're going to show you how broad sozo really is. Now, these stories show us the scope of salvation and the depth of healing that's available for you today. All right, so the stories start in Luke chapter 7, verse 36. Our first story is this. You're familiar with all of these, so I'll rush through them really quickly. There's a woman who comes and anoints Jesus' feet with the oil right there. And Jesus looks at her. He says that what she has done and her faith has made her sozo. What Jesus is talking about right there, he actually defines and says her sins are forgiven. Right there, we clearly see an instance where Jesus forgives sin, and the word sozo is clearly used. Well, if you keep on reading after her story, another thing happens. The disciples all get in a boat, and they're going to go across the water there, across the sea. And the Bible tells us that this storm comes upon them. And the Bible says that these trained fishermen, these trained seamen, they're all there and they are actually frantic for their life. Well, this is the one where they go up to Jesus and they say, hey, Jesus, get up. And Matthew's recording the same story as Luke. And in Matthew chapter 8:25, the disciples actually go to him and they say the word. They say, sozo us. Now, they're not exclaiming for Jesus to forgive their sin. What they're wanting Jesus to do is bring physical safety to the moment because they think that they're about to die. In other words, we've seen that sozo is, number one, the forgiveness of sin, but we also see that this word sozo, which is translated as healing, we see that that word too is also used to denote physical safety. Well, after that, the disciples are fine. They come to the other side of the sea, and they go among these tombs. And there's a man that lives among the tombs. His name is Legion, because he has hundreds, maybe even thousands of demons. The Bible tells us that he cuts himself with rocks and stones and just torments himself. The demons come to Jesus, and they cry out to him. And Jesus then casts them into the swine, and they run down the hill. And this is the story where all of the townspeople then come out and they see the man who had been formerly demon-possessed sitting in his right mind, and they marvel how he had been sozo. Well, right there, the word isn't physical safety only. The word isn't forgiveness of sin. The word is he's been physically freed from spiritual oppression and torment. So we see three things that the word sozo means there. Well, the next story begins unfolding, and Jesus is walking through a crowd, and Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, comes up to him and says to Jesus, hey, my daughter, she's at the point of death. She's at the point of death. Can you come and can you come heal her? And Jesus says, well, I'm coming. I'll come with you. Well, right then, that story is interrupted because the woman with the flow of blood in Luke chapter 7, verse 47, reaches out and touches him, and he feels power come out of him. And so he turns around and he says, your faith has made you sozo. Your faith has sozo you. Your faith has healed you. It wasn't the forgiveness of sin. It wasn't physical safety. It wasn't spiritual torment. She was physically made well of something that had riddled her for years. There we see sozo is healing. Well, while Jesus is talking to her, people from the ruler of the synagogue's house come and say, don't worry, don't bother the teacher any longer, your daughter's dead. Jesus tells him, he says, don't worry, just believe, I'm coming. They go there, he puts all of the mourners out of the house, and he says, little girl, I say to you, arise. Immediately she rises, she comes back to life, she is made sozo. And there we see that sozo is actually used to denote resurrection of the dead. In other words, this healing that happens, it's comprehensive. Jesus was more successful than what you might have thought. In fact, there's a chart on page 46 of your book, if you'll look at it, that gives you all of this information. Okay, so point number 11, it rolls right into this, that sozo is not only the forgiveness of sins, it is the total reign of Jesus over all of life. It is the absolute restoration and reconciliation of all things. So Paul says in Colossians 1:20, that there's no area that's outside of the reign of Christ, that everything falls under the domain of his authority. And yes, the forgiveness of sins that's offered to us, it's incredible. It's a beautiful message. but there's so much more that's available to you. And I would liken it to this. On Christmas, my kids come bounding down the stairs, and imagine we have all of these presents under the tree. And the kids go up and they grab just one present, and they say, I'll take this one present. And then they leave and they have it. And it's an incredible present. It's something I provided for them as their father. But I would want them to have more. I would want them to have all of the presents that I had purchased, all of the presents that I provided. And many times well-intended people say, well, if we teach healing, and if we teach miracles, and if we teach spiritual freedom, if we teach all these other things, even resurrection or physical safety, it somehow diminishes the message of the forgiveness of sin. And I would say not at all. It amplifies everything that Jesus came to do. It amplifies every bit of the message of the kingdom. Here's what's shocking. If you look on page 47 of your book, you're going to see the chart right there that the word sozo, that kind of healing that denotes everything Christ came to do, it's not used 30 times in the New Testament like iomai is. It's not used 40 times like therapeuo. That word is actually used 101 times, showing that all healing is available, that anything that you need is actually accessible. And remember, it doesn't depend upon your faith. Your God is totally good. Your Father is for you. It just depends upon your willingness to honor and to see it right there in front of you.